Hello everybody, welcome to our webinar Win More Business with Legal Project Management. Today you will learn how and more importantly why legal project management can help law firms win more business and more work from their clients. Today I'm joined with Antony Smith, expert in legal project management and trainer in the same, and he's also the founder of Legal Project Management Limited. Antony, would you please tell us something about yourself?
Hi, hello there, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, and in particular, I'd like to welcome those who dialed in. If they're in different time zones, I can see that it may be no good time of day for you. I've been running my consultancy company now for about 4 years. Before that, I've spent really my entire life in the legal industry. I spent some time as a practicing lawyer, an IT developer, and a project manager. What I do now is I help law firms and really try to become better at what they do in terms of legal service delivery. And I think the best way to doing that is through this means of legal project management. And today I'll take you through some of the core elements of that.
Thank you, Antony. That sounds very impressive and very wide curriculum that you have yourself. So, and myself also, my name is Ivan Rasic, and I am a founder and CEO of LegalTrek, the co-host of this webinar today. And just very briefly to tell you what you can expect to hear today from Antony and myself, and to break down a little bit this agenda for you, we are going to start with one specific scenario of meeting a client before a project starts. And there you can see how you can go about your plan, the skills that you need to employ, the data you would likely like to have, and some pricing methodology in the process. Further, Antony is going to talk about the client focus mentality and why everything does actually revolve around your clients. And finally, he's going to give you a few tips on how to start with legal project management on, let's say, for starters on a small scale, and how you can further expand from there. And finally, we are going to get into the Q&A mode, and we are going to tell you what you can expect next from how you can get in touch with Antony and what you can actually expect next from us in our webinars. So with that being said, Antony, I'm just going to give you floor so you can take over the presentation.
Okay, thank you for that. And I would like to start off first by introducing this notion of project management maturity. And those people who've been reading my blog posts will be aware that I've written about this in the past. I think it's really an interesting concept, and I think it's interesting really for the following reasons. If you think about it, in order to implement legal project management, or indeed in order to implement any change process within a law firm, you really have to do that by means of a project. So you're driving a project to implement change at a really high level. The change we're talking about today is legal project management, but that in itself will be supported by other things going on within the firm. It may be process mapping, it may be improvements to legal IT, it may be training about pricing and so on, and each of these are projects. Now, there's been a lot of research done, particularly by the likes of PricewaterhouseCoopers, which has shown that organizations which are more mature are more successful at delivering projects, which sounds a pretty logical thing to say, really. Now, of course, if they're more successful at delivering projects, that means they're more successful at delivering change. And there's a direct correlation between being successful at delivering projects and delivering change and being successful generally as an organization. Now, this is regardless of the sector of business that the particular organization is in. It might be law, it might be construction, IT, telecoms, whatever it is. It's a general thing that has been found by the research done to date. There's been relatively little research done about project management maturity, specifically in the context of the legal sector. Often when I give talks to people and I'm with firms, I will introduce this model or something similar to it. And I will ask people if they can indicate broadly where they believe their organization is on this project management maturity scheme. I won't go through all of the detail, but I'm sure you can see the screen there, and you can understand really what it's about. So if level 1, for example, it's sporadic use of IT, of PM, sorry. There's no formal project management training, and there's little organizational support. And then of course you go through the levels of sort of project management sophistication until you get to level 5, where there's processes in place for continuous project improvement. There's really close integration between the project delivery and knowledge management and knowledge transfer and so on and so forth. And there's a range of levels of project management maturity between them. Now, I'm aware that on the webinar we have a number of people in different legal service organizations, sometimes servicing slightly different parts of the industry. And so what I thought might be useful would be if perhaps you could have a look at this chart, and if you could indicate where you believe your organization is in terms of project management maturity. Do you believe your organization generally, in terms of being able to deliver projects and therefore change, do you believe your organization is at level 1, sporadic, level 2, initial, level 3 at the implementation phase, level 4, monitor, or level 5, the optimized phase? I think that Ivan will be able to kind of retake control and allow you to cast a vote.
Absolutely, Anthony. Thank you so much for this breakdown. So just to reiterate what Anthony is asking everybody from the audience to do right now, just to take a look, take maybe additional few seconds to take a look at this chart that Anthony has just now ran us through. And please, I will right now enable you to participate in a vote in the poll on your side. And once you get to see the poll, just select one of these 5 levels that you feel best describes your law firm. You will see this poll shortly. Actually, you should see it right now. So please, once you do, just take your mouse and click one of the options. Okay, we have almost half of the attendees have voted. We're just going to wait for a few more seconds. 70%. Come on, don't be shy. Okay, let's keep this poll open for additional 10 seconds. I think that should suffice. We are close to 90%. And okay, so I'm going to close off the poll right now, and we are going to show results shortly. So the poll is closed, and let me share the results with all of you, and then Anthony, I'm sure he's going to have some comments about it. So let me just go to it. So Anthony, do you have a chance to see the results?
Yes, I do. And that, I mean, I have to say that reflects really what I find when I ask people about things like this in these seminars I run and in the talks I give. In that, you find that let's say half, maybe left more half, or no more than level 2. In fact, I make that what about just over 60%. And really that says to me that in terms of the legal industry, there's still a long way to go for legal service providers in order to develop their project management capability and to develop their project delivery capability. Particularly, I think, when you compare the legal sector with other sectors. I'm sorry I don't have the figures to hand, but I'm pretty sure you would see that all the sectors, particularly of course the construction sector, will be quite a bit in advance of that. Now of course, if the organisation is at a relatively low level of project management maturity, that immediately poses one problem for people like myself and yourself out there wanting to introduce project management into law firms, because of course that requires change and it requires support. And if the organisation is not really in a project sense mature enough to be able to offer that project support, then to do it properly is going to be quite difficult. Nevertheless, it can be done, and it is being done. I think it's fair to say that at the moment, most of the larger law firms, particularly here in the UK and in the City of London, they are now practicing legal project management, and there are a number of people who are employed full time as legal project managers, working alongside their fee earners, alongside their fee earner colleagues. What I believe is, though, that the project management is not and should not be confined to the very largest law firms. And in this scenario, I'll walk you through. When I first created it, I was really thinking, well, how might legal project management look to a sort of small and medium-sized law firm that's servicing small and medium-sized clients? The issues faced with those kind of firms are the same whether you're a large law firm, medium-sized law firm, or indeed a small one. And so these scenarios I've mentioned, the level area, is really based around a lawyer going to meet an existing client to discuss the potential about acquiring more legal work from that existing client. The existing client is an owner of a medium-sized manufacturing company that's instructed the law firm previously about some employment law matters. So the whole premise of this particular scenario is that the lawyer concerned works for a modern law firm. So the firm she works for has already conducted the value stream mapping exercise. So the firm and the lawyer itself knows that they have streamlined processes, and they know which elements of typical employment cases can be done by the firm, which elements can or may be outsourced, roughly how much a standard matter might cost.
Now, if I
yes.
just may interrupt at this point, so you explained the premise of this example pretty well. I was just wondering, from your experience so far in consultancy, how often is this the case? I understand that this is maybe an ideal example, but what would you say, how often you can say that you've seen examples like this one?
Sorry, how often there would be a legal process map and a value stream mapping exercise done?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. It tends to obviously vary between firm to firm and practice area to practice area. Traditionally, this kind of work has been done the most by law firms which practice in the what's known as the kind of, or referred to as the high volume, low value kind of law. And that's traditionally been over here in the UK, and I'm sure elsewhere, in fields such as personal injury, maybe conveyancing, perhaps wills too. And the idea is, particularly in personal injury, you are having to turn over a lot of cases, so you want to do that most efficiently and most effectively. So for many years now, firms and legal departments within firms that focus on that kind of work have done the process mapping, and as you'll see on the next slide, they've also gone on and built in legal workflows. What's happened over the last few years, over the last 4 or 5 years or so, this idea of legal process mapping has really broken out of the high volume, low value area. And so what we've now seen are many more law firms and other legal service organisations conducting process mapping exercises to look at how they may do, let's say, their M&A work, or their other corporate work, or their high value property and leasing work, and those kind of areas. One thing that I have noticed though, I've spoken to some legal service providers who've said, oh yes, we've done process mapping. We've done the process maps. So I say, oh great, so how did that go? And some say to me, well, we've not actually done anything with it. So some legal service organisations have gone to the trouble of doing the process mapping and taken time out to understand how their legal processes work, but then have not gone on to actually do anything useful with those maps. Now, that could be for a number of reasons. So, for example, I've come across firms where perhaps the whole idea of process mapping has been driven by one or two key individuals in the firm, and they have left. And you can understand why the initiative might just fade away. So, similarly, I've spoken to people where they have been involved in the process mapping, but they've been unable to get the buy-in across the firm as a whole. So although you might get one department that's really keen on the process mapping, the interaction with the other departments in the firm has been kind of lukewarm. Now, if you think about it, ultimately this refers back to the point I was making earlier, right at the start. All of this kind of activity, which supports the idea of legal project management, they themselves should be driven as projects. So if you're going to embark on a legal process mapping exercise, a value stream mapping exercise, that itself needs to be driven as a project, needs to be managed as a project. Then, if it's set up properly as a project, it matters less whether one or two key people have left. And really, almost by definition, if you set it up properly as a project and you run it as a project, you should, in terms of your project initiation, have secured buy-in from your colleagues elsewhere in the firm. And so the process mapping should go ahead, and you should do something with the maps.
I completely agree with you, Anthony, because I actually, and this argument that you should treat project and process mapping as a project in its own right. I'll just take an opportunity to briefly mention here John Grant from United States, who is an attorney himself. Currently, I believe he's not practicing, but right now he's being busy with writing a book on agile methods and more specifically Kanban. And recently I read the first half of his book, because it's the first half is currently published. And he said if you want to implement, in his particular case he mentions Kanban, but it's a project management method nonetheless. The first step I advise you to do is to take the letter of consent from the partners, from the management, because first you need to have them buy in, and then you have to treat this from the top to the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, great point. This is great point. So maybe we can continue with the scenario that you had in mind. I just briefly wanted to ask you how many times did you find your ideal primer here is reality, but please do go on.
Right, okay. Also for many firms, a value stream mapping exercise, it is in itself a really useful thing to do, provided it gets carried through. Then following on from the back of that, as I mentioned earlier, you will often find that those firms which implement workflows, legal workflow technology, that will often have been done on the back of their process mapping. Now, I want to make a slight distinction here. What I would regard as process mapping, the value stream mapping, if you will, if you could think of that as kind of a higher level form of process mapping. That's really a process mapping. It's almost akin to a time and motion study, as in the process mapping, because you want to find out how the processes work at present, how they could work in the future, and most importantly, you want to find out where the process slows down, and you want to find out where the blockages are. So in terms of process mapping, as in the previous screen, it's almost like a time and motion study. In fact, it is a little bit like that. When the firm, or when many law firms then come to implement legal workflow, they should take the process mapping, or do some form of process mapping, to a slightly lower level. The lower level being that to create legal workflows, you need to be able to know how to put documents together electronically. You need to know where in the workflow you want to store documents. You need to know in the workflow, for example, what tasks to put in the fairness die, what tasks to escalate to team leaders, and so on and so forth. So legal workflow is more about the active how things get done and enabling things get done. So a high-level process mapping can maybe show what's going wrong, where the blockages are, how things might be improved. The lower level workflow mapping shows how things can be changed using legal workflow, and you develop the low-level maps. The other thing I'll say there, you can see on the screen there, that this law firm in this scenario uses data analytics software to help scope, estimate, and price based on the previous data. Now, of course, law firms will have a lot of data regarding their previous work, and when it comes to scoping and pricing and estimating, that should be the first place that they look. They should look at that data to see how they've done things in the past. It's really obvious, really. But even now, I think many firms tend not to do this, or if they do it relatively poorly. And I suspect it's really because of the quality of the data they have in their existing systems and their ability to access that data and to understand the data really. There's a lot of software out there that can help law firms, ranging from specialist legal project management software through to practice management software that has elements of project management built in. So what I'm seeing more and more now in the market is there's a whole range of legal software that will refer to project management as part of the software works. And it will have project management tools there for the lawyers to use, including to greater or lesser degree data analytics and data reporting. Then, again, in this scenario, the assumption is here that for the main work types of the firm, they have standard project plans. Now, if the firm, particularly in the high volume, low value sector, if the work is really driven by the legal workflow software, in effect, the project plans for those projects, the high volume, low value cases, the personal injury conveyancing, they are really encapsulated in the legal workflow software because the software is driving the way the lawyers work. For lots of legal work outside of that, I think it's perfectly feasible for lawyers to draw up what might be called baseline standard project plans and be able to have those ready to either discuss with colleagues and particularly to discuss with clients. Now there's many ways of drawing up baseline project plans, and you can see there in the middle icon is a representation of a Gantt chart. And me being a project manager, I tend to turn to a Gantt chart first. For non-project managers, I have to say, often Gantt charts are not necessarily the best way of communicating to non-project managers. In my experience, I found Gantt charts to be really, really useful in constructing the plans and doing the what-ifs and doing all this kind of thing. But then, to explain to someone without a project background, it's probably best to explain that Gantt chart in another way, either by means of a checklist or simply a number of bullet points, but referencing key dates and referencing key tasks. So ideally, the firm would have a series of standard project plans covering their most common matter types.
This is interesting. Why would you say that you wouldn't generally recommend Gantt charts as maybe the most appropriate method of presenting the workflow? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, of course. And again, it's purely based on my personal experience. I know there's lots of software out there, including legal software, that now represents legal matters in form of the Gantt chart. And funny enough, many years ago, probably in the early 1990s, when I first started out in my professional legal career, so as it is, I work for a law firm called Masons, and I work with Richard Susskind, who I assume lots of you will have heard of. One of the first things we were asked to do, Masons were and still are a well-known construction law firm. And interestingly, one of the first things we were asked to do was to create Gantt charts to represent the legal matters so the lawyers could talk to their clients. Now don't forget, most of their clients are in the construction industry, or were at that time. And so you can see that people in the construction industry could immediately relate to the Gantt charts, because that's what they do in the construction industry. All I can say is that while a high-level Gantt chart is really useful. Now, when I say a high level, you have your key tasks just rolled up into one bar. So you have number 1, 3, 4 bars against a timeline. While I think high-level Gantt charts useful as a means of generating conversation and explaining things to people, what I found in my practice and what I found really ever since then, and it may be a fault of mine as much as anyone else, but when I've gone to people with a fairly detailed Gantt chart, so I go to someone who doesn't have a project background, but a senior manager, senior lawyer, and I explain the Gantt chart, I can see them struggling with it. You know, to be honest, their eyes glaze over and I just go, whoa. And so I've learned that rather than try and take people without a project background through what I would regard as a detailed Gantt chart, it's probably best not to do that. At best, keep your Gantt chart at a really high level, and then really supplement that with an overview, which might be a checklist or a bullet point list of key dates and key activities. In my experience, I found that worked best.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
So then you can see the, and again, as I referred earlier, in our scenario, the young lawyer has been able to pull out reports from the analytics software to show things such as duration of matters handled and for the client previously, including cost and time written off, etc. Now, when I'm preparing to meet the client, the objective is, or should be, initially to listen to what the client's got to say and to understand the client's needs and goals and consider how best the lawyer and her firm can meet them. It's not necessarily to present the client out of the box with the solution. It's really too early for that in any event. And a lot of this is really based around the idea of value pricing. And those of you who are familiar with the concept of value pricing will know that really the key to it all is trying to assess the value that the client will place on the work. And you can really only do that after you've had the conversation with the client about what it is they want, what it is they value, how they want the work to proceed. And it's easy to say, it's easy to explain like that. But I think for lawyers, they find it quite difficult to think in those terms, and to approach clients in those terms. And we all know the reason why. It's the notion of possibly the lawyer selling, quote and unquote, going into a sales environment. And it makes them feel uncomfortable. So rather than think they're going into a sales environment and they need to sell, the first thing is they're not. They're first of all going to understand what the client wants, what the client needs. Then they're going to go back and think how best to service those needs. Then the next meeting, they look to explain how they're going to deliver to the client and ideally deliver value to the client in advance. I strongly believe that part of the value that law firms can and should be delivering to their clients and offering to their clients are the project management skills within the firm. That's the project management skills of the lawyers, obviously, but also the skills of all of the support staff in order to support the lawyer in order to deliver the work effectively and efficiently. Now, those skills themselves, I think, should be charged, and should be charged as part of the bundle of the charging process. You'll see a little later about the charging process. Let's say about how I explain this. But if you think about it, if project management is of value to the client, and certainly of value to the law firm, somewhere the cost of providing those services, whether the law firm has dedicated legal project managers or the cost of training up the firm's lawyers and all the infrastructure supporting their lawyers inevitably needs to be passed on to the client. And I don't think firms should be shy about it. I think they should, providing they are good at legal project management, say this is what we do, and this is part of our charging.
I think you're absolutely right. And now that you mentioned this one, I remember recently reading an article about general counsels being more picky during tender processes and actually selecting those firms who demonstrate clear project management methods, techniques, and skills in their proposals. So I think this is, you scored this correctly on many points, starting with the first one, that it certainly brings more value. At least it's perceived as a greater value, and of course what is perceived as a value, then it certainly is more valuable to the clients. Second of all, law firms are constantly seeking many different ways to stand out from competition, and usually they are looking mainly in the expertise, in the package fee pricing models, etc. But I think this is also one area of improvement and let's say opportunity to give extra value to the clients that they should definitely leverage.
Exactly. One thing, the other thing I would just like to say is that often, in terms of a tender process, if a large organisation is putting legal service out to tender, one of the things they will often ask about now is the legal project management capability or the project management capability of the firms bidding for the work, and that's not very common. So in this meeting with the client, the meeting and the discussion goes well. The client explains the problems that they're currently experiencing, the goals they would like to achieve, and the potential solutions. The lawyer at this stage is mainly in listening mode, although all the while thinking in the back of her mind how her firm might be able to deliver the appropriate services. Then, once back in the office, the lawyer then goes back and consults with the people who have the role of pricing manager, people in the knowledge management team, and of course the legal delivery team themselves. You know, the lawyers in this case in the employment group who will be actually doing the work and delivering the work. Now, a number of points here. What's to try to emphasise here that it really is it really is about the firm as a whole holding together, and it's a team thing. It's not solely down to the individual lawyer to do the work, obviously. And in order to estimate price and scope, the lawyer should take feedback from the colleagues in the office. So the other point I like to make is, although it's fairly common now for the very largest of law firms to have people like pricing managers and pricing directors, if you think about it, even very smallest law firm will have someone who fulfills that role. It might be the head of finance, it might be the firm's senior partner, whoever it is. There will be people within the firm who have knowledge about these areas. So the idea is, after the initial discussion with the client, then the lawyer goes back to the people with that kind of knowledge in the firm in order to discuss how the legal services for this particular client might be delivered. So the range of possible solutions will be discussed, and as mentioned before, will be discussed in particular with their colleagues. Once all of that's done, you would hope then that the lawyer is able to scope, estimate, and price with confidence. And she should now be able to put a range of options to the client. With each option will be supported by a project plan, and she'll feel confident after having a look at the data of the previous work, the previous matters that have been done for that client. She feels confident about the pricing that she's going to propose and the solutions she's going to propose. So the next time she meets the client, she in fact proposes 3 solutions and 3 fees. The important point to notice here is that it's not simply 3 fee levels which are discussed, fee package A, B and C, although they are in fact 3 different fee levels. What's discussed is 3 service levels, or three different scope types of work. And of course, for each different service and scope of work, that work will be priced accordingly. So it could be the fee package A, which might be the lowest fixed fee, let's say, would be for all of the employment litigation work. The middle package, package B, would be for all of the employment legal work, which would be the contentious and the non-contentious, the litigation and the drafting and so on. Fee package C would be for all of the outsourcing work. In other words, this would be for the legal work and for any non-legal work that the law firm feels capable of doing on behalf of the client, which might go as far as interviewing potential senior personnel, keeping all the HR practices and procedures in shape, and so on and so forth. Ideally, fee package C would be the stretch price. That would be almost the ceiling price. If the client were to go for that, it's kind of the champagne price almost. Most of the time, and we all do this, you find that people will go for package B. I know that I do. When I'm presented with three options, 3 different service levels, 9 times out of 10, I'll go for package B, so long as I understand what is in each package and what it is I'm buying. And I think that's true of both services and the products. We look for the quality of the services, the quality of the products, and 9 times out of 10, if we're presented with 3 things, we'll go for the middle. And at this meeting, the lawyer will go through the baseline project plans that she has in place for each of the matter types that she is going to work for the client, and they're going to deliver. I stress the baseline point about the project plans because obviously, as we all know, in the real world, project plans will change anyway once projects start, and legal projects are no different to any others. Now, assuming that the client does indeed go for option B, all the lawyer now needs to do is manage all of the legal matters sufficiently so that at the end of the process, let's say over the next year, so if for each of the packages, the lawyer said, well, for the coming year, package A, we will do all of your employment litigation work. For the coming year, package B, we'll do all of your employment work. Package C, potentially do all of the HR work, including some interviewing, etc. So what they now need to do is to manage that work efficiently, so that obviously at the end of the year, they're going to be able to turn in a profit. Behind each project plan, or kind of surrounding each project plan, the law firm will have a standard legal project management method, which will include lower level processes for monitoring the processes and monitoring the delivery of the work, monitoring the progress of the work, checking for any variance between the progress of the work and the original plan, taking corrective action to put things back into line if there's any divergence between progress and plan, keeping the client informed and invoking change control. I would just like to say a point about the keeping the client informed, particularly, and the change control. The keeping the client informed, what I've often found, probably one of the biggest differences between project managers and lawyers, is that project managers will draw up a project communications plan for each project. The project communications plan will set out all of the stakeholders in the project, In other words, all those stakeholders who will be affected by the project, which might be internal to the organization or external. And then the communications plan will set out what those stakeholders need to know, how they need to know it. And it will also set out the frequency of the communication to those stakeholders. So let's assume the project manager will say, okay, we have a stakeholder plan, and for this class of stakeholder, I'm going to send an update report every 2 weeks. Most project managers will, or certainly should, send the update report, the status report, every 2 weeks without fail. Even though sometimes there may not be too much to say in the intervening 2 weeks, the update report will still be sent out. In any event, there's always something to be said within the intervening time. What I tend to find with lawyers is they tend to think, well, if nothing much has happened over the last week or two, I won't bother the client. I'll just leave things be because there's not an awful lot to say. So what you then find is that a week or two goes by, and then another week or two goes by, another week or two goes by, until it's quite a while since the client last heard from the lawyer. And so then the client starts to wonder what's going on, what's going wrong. So it's really important to keep the communications consistent and regular. And that's probably one of the biggest differences, I think, between running matters as projects and thinking as a project manager, compared to the way, in my experience, most lawyers seem to run their matters.
I would agree with this notion, simply because also when I was in a client role a few times, I would always be interested in, there must have, something must have happened in these past 2 weeks or a week of silence, as you just mentioned. And if the silence is too long, there is a saying that goes something like, if you're not talking to your client, be sure that somebody else will. So this is a good point to make, that as lawyers sometimes we simply don't treat communication always as a independent, as a separate but necessary part of the work. We simply think, yeah, I'm keeping my clients updated as soon as I have any results or something. But I think this is a great point to make.
Yeah. The last point there is this idea of change control. The whole idea of value pricing, or if you like to think of it in terms of fixed pricing, depending on the value assigned to the work. Lawyers, like anyone else, they can only price on the information that's currently available to them. So they can only price on the scope of the matter or the scope of the work as is known at that time. And most of us understand that, and clients will understand that too. Now, if early on you make a claim, lawyers will make a claim that they have a change control procedure. So should the scope of the work change because of changing client requirements, the lawyer has the right to change the price quoted. Now, to me, that's really no more than common sense. If the scope changes, so either it's going to take more time, or more expertise is going to be required in order to complete the matter, then of course the price will then need to be changed. Now, if this is done constructively, and if a constant dialogue and constant communications are kept with the client, I think you find that most times the clients will sign off the revised pricing. And often the key to it is this whole notion of bringing projects on time and on costs and so on and so forth. Actually, because practically every project will change compared to the initial estimates of the time and the cost and so on, the real key to project management, and including legal project management, is whether the lawyer can bring the client with them during the matter to sign the matter on. So yes, the scope may have changed and the price may have changed, but so long as the matter's developing and the work's developing, and at various points the client's saying, yes, I can see that to change, I sign that off, and I can see this is changed, I'll sign that off, there should not be a problem. So change control, if done properly and if done appropriately, is key, I think, to a lot of legal project management, and it's particularly key when talking about this notion of value pricing, and when people talking about fixed pricing and putting a cap on pricing and so on and so forth. Everything is or should revolve around the client. So really everything we discussed so far, and whether it's process improvements, IT systems, pricing, the pre-project planning, the pre-matter planning, and obviously the delivery revolves around the client, or should do. It's again, it sounds a really obvious thing to say, but you'd be surprised how many times, if you just look at IT systems, for example, which is probably a classic case, often law firms start to think about how their lawyers can benefit from the new systems rather than how their clients can benefit. And similarly, they start thinking about how their lawyers can benefit from the process improvements rather than how their clients can benefit. And it's really, you should always bear the client in mind and keep the client focused to its route. So how to start legal project management? And for those of you in law firms who yet to start or thinking of starting, and I'm using legal project management here in its broadest sense, and maybe process improvements of various kinds, how to start and where to start. Well, all law firms will have a new client and matter process, new client and matter onboarding process. So the obvious place to start is to look there. So I would suggest if you to look there and you look at the amount of time that your staff spends working through your existing process. You might also want to have a look at the data capture. Have a look at what data your staff need to capture in order to onboard a new client and in order to onboard a new matter, and where that data gets sent elsewhere in the firm. I think you'd be surprised. I expect 9 times out of 10, you'll see there's either an inefficient use of data or there's some data duplication somewhere. And you might also think about, in terms of the client onboarding process, how does the client benefit? I mean, as yet, the client's not received any benefit from the legal work. That's a little bit down the line. And when a new client is taken on board, and when a new matter starts, law firms have to send out a letter, certainly in even Wales, informing clients of their rights, informing the clients of how the law firm is going to have to work under the key provisions of the Solicitors Regulation Authority and formally the Law Society. But if you think about it, there's so much more that law firms can do at that point in terms of onboarding clients. And I'm thinking particularly here of just sending the clients right at the start just something of value. So you've got the new client, you've got the new matter, as well as sending out the client care letter, why not send them an overview of the area of work, the area of legal work that you've been instructed to do and that you're going to deliver for them? Why not send them an overview of industry trends, perhaps, and the legal issues around those trends? In other words, give the client something of value fairly early on, ideally as part of the onboarding process. And I think you'll find that that will start to work off on the right foot. And that will help in any further discussions about change control pricing and so on and so on and so forth. At this stage, does anyone have any questions at all? And Ivan and myself will try our best to answer them.
Absolutely, absolutely, Anthony. There are some questions that came during the presentation so far. So basically, Chris asks, and I'm going to read the question entirely. How would Anthony recommend managing the lawyers who execute their work on the plan? So okay, so I'm just going to repeat the premise just to make sure that all of us are on the same page. And Chris, please do comment if I'm getting this right. So we have a project in place, and we have set the execution steps, and we have assigned people to execute those. So now the question is, how do we actually monitor if those people really do execute according to the plan, and if not, how do we manage them?
Yeah. Okay. Well, of course, already in existence in most law firms, you'll find that lawyers will need to discuss the matter and their workload with their supervising partner and with their team leader in any event. So there are, for most law firms, already inbuilt checks and periodic checks done. One route in order to look at the sort of low-level management is those firms that have legal workflow software in place. It's quite easy for team leaders, let's say, and senior managers to see the work that's been done and to see if tasks have been done within the appointed timescale. So you would often see in legal workflow, for example, if a lawyer has a task which must be done by close of play today, and it's not yet been done, that task will escalate automatically, or should escalate automatically, to the lawyer's team leader using the legal workflow software. So the team leader can then take immediate action. Now, the action might be to reassign that task to another lawyer. It might be simply to walk over to the lawyer concerned and say, "Look, I think you need to do this task." So that's kind of the short-term one way of doing the short-term day-to-day management. The idea of managing legal teams, I really do like the ideas behind and the concept of this notion of agile project management and an agile way of working. And one element of this is the stand-up meetings of the legal teams. Now, to do in theory, if you have a really big project on, and you have a settled team of five or six lawyers working on this really big project, you could have a stand-up meeting, which would last no more than 5 or 10 minutes a day, just to check. You go around the table, well, you go around the room because people are standing, and you'd ask them, will you be able to do the tasks you were set yesterday? Are you confident you're going to be able to accomplish what you need to do today? Are there any blockages that you're aware of that would stop you accomplishing what you need to accomplish? Now, you don't necessarily need to do that every single day, although that would help, but if you do it every other day or a couple of times a week. And the other point I would like to make is that, although I refer to agile work, the field of project management is very broad, and you basically find what works. And if you find things that work for you, you use those. But I personally found that running a team where there's a long project and it's a settled team, running stand-up meetings, not necessarily every day, but running them regularly, that seems to work.
Okay, sounds great. And there was another question from Mitch, essentially asks if you can very briefly, back on the napkin, compare maybe just a few or recommend one of the few project management techniques. So my personal feeling is that, but I might be wrong, that these techniques can help different teams depending on their complexity and also on the personal preferences. But what would you say on that, Antony?
Okay, so you mean legal project management reference books or sites or the starting places? Is that the question, Ivan?
Not about the starting places, but more about the actual methods. For example, we all know there is a waterfall method, there is a Scrum method, Kanban method,
Yeah,
the Gantt
I
method.
understand.
So
I
essentially,
understand
which
that,
of
sorry.
the techniques, if you can compare, and if any of those, would you recommend and why?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't. And the reason for that is that I think what is required will vary between firm to firm and indeed practice area to practice area. And another way of looking at it is that the field of project management, forget the legal for a moment, the field of project management is pretty broad. And there's all sorts of methods in there. Where it might be agile, it might be waterfall, it might be Prince 2. Prince 2 is particularly big here in the UK. And there's a whole number of methods and approaches that people may like to adopt. And it's really a case of finding out what's going to work best in that particular organisation. Now I have to say that many of the methods will say, let's take Prince 2 as the example. So as part of Prince 2, there is this notion of being able to adapt Prince 2 to the particular circumstances of the project. Now that's all well and good. Part of the problem with that, though, is that the people doing the adapting, the project managers and the people needing to implement Prince 2 in the environment, need to know not only about the project, but they need to know enough about Prince 2 and to have enough project management experience in order to adapt Prince 2, if that makes sense. It becomes almost a catch-22, where you say, well, here's the method, I know I'm meant to adapt it, but I don't necessarily have the experience of how to adapt it best in this situation. And it is a real problem. It is a real problem. Not only in legal environments, but in other environments too. How best to adapt things to suit particular projects. I mean, if I were to, at a really broad brush, I would suggest if you are dealing with a work group or law firm that works mainly in the high volume, low value areas, such as personal injury conveyancing, etc., you probably will be driven by the legal software anyway, so your projects will be, and your project management plans will be enveloped in that software. If you're dealing at completely the other end of the scale, the really, really high value, the M&A work, the big ticket regulatory investigation work that lots of city law firms do, I would actually suggest that you might be best looking at agile and taking some of the elements of agile. I refer to the Scrum meeting or the stand-up meeting before, and the notion of working as a team. So if you work with a fixed team, that might be another way of going about it. I suppose the key thing about legal project management, about project management generally, is once you define a scope, you need to chunk things down into discrete parts and discrete elements. And there's no real right or wrong way of doing that. You just need to chunk things down and then think how you can put them together again as a project. I'm sorry I can't give a really good answer to that. But they're my thoughts on it.
Absolutely, thank you. And I believe there are a few more questions, but I think we have time maybe for one more. So Rita asks, in your view, Antony, what would you say a legal project manager? So we are talking about now staff here, about personnel. What kind of skills and qualities do you, Antony, feel a legal project manager should have to be, ideally qualified for the position?
Yeah. This is probably the question I get asked most often. People who pass by my website and send me an email out of all the questions. There's probably one most popular, and The first thing I would say is I'm biased. Obviously, I have a legal background and I used to practice as a lawyer. So therefore, I would say that a legal project manager having a legal background is going to make the most effective contribution to the law firm and to the legal organisation. Now, to be fair, that's not written in stone, and it's not necessarily given, and lots of people don't necessarily agree with that, and that's perfectly valid. I know that lots of people who occupy the roles of legal project managers, particularly in the larger city law firms in the City of London, do not have a legal background as such. They have more of a professional project management background. So what they bring to the firm is their professional project management expertise, and then they gradually get used to the legal terminology and the way the law firm works and so on. I probably, as you might expect, prefer a combination of the two. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, the other big key thing for me is, regardless of person's background, just a willingness to learn and a willingness to keep learning about project management, process improvement, and all that stuff that keeps going on. It's just I've been doing this for quite a while now, but it's still a case. There's always new things to learn. I've learned things from the projects that I've done, and I also learn things from what's going on in the legal industry at any one time. I think the willingness to learn is really important. And because of that, even people without much of a project background, you could sign up for a course, find out about the principles of project management, learn more about it, and then begin to apply those principles to almost any environment.
Great. Thank you so much for this answer. And I believe, we can continue this discussion all day long or all night long, depending on where you are right now. But due to the economy of time, we are going to have to stop with questions here. And I'm going to direct all of you who would like to continue this discussion further on to take it online on Twitter. And you can use the hashtag #NewLawEdu, just so we can keep track on those and answer aptly. And as you can see here, this is the Twitter handle of Antony Smith. This is how you can find him and ask directly questions, post directly questions to Anthony, and you can also ask questions to LegalTrek if you have about any of the aspects of this topic that we discussed today, or anything else that maybe you would like to discuss. And with that being said, Anthony, I want to thank you a lot on behalf, in my personal name as well, but on behalf of the whole LegalTrek team who helped us bring this webinar. And also, I'm sure I'm speaking also on behalf of our audience today when I'm saying that we had amazing time listening to your insightful comments and points in legal project management. And as you can see here on screen, as you can see, this is the way you can contact Anthony if you have any further questions about this topic, or if you would like to expand further. And just for the end of this presentation, I have something little that I would like to show to everybody who's still with us. Just bear with us for maybe one more minute. Anthony spoke about Agile. You mentioned Agile a few times, and Kanban, and this is just fresh out of our development team. It's a short online preview of LegalTrek inbuilt Kanban boards, but I'm just going to play the video and let the video speak for itself. So that was a short preview of the Kanban boards that we are soon going to be releasing to all our customers. And once more, thank you all for attending today's webinar. Thank you, Antony, for being with us. And thanks everybody around the globe who joined us during the day or night to listen to all these interesting arguments about how legal project management actually helps law firms attract more clients and win more work from existing clients. What you can expect from us after this webinar ends is an email where you will get the link to the YouTube video of this webinar, so you can play it, roll it back anytime you like. We're also going to include our latest ebook on how you can attract new clients, and we are going to keep you in the loop with the invitation for our next webinar yet to be announced. Now, all of our clients who followed us today, you know that you can contact us in many different channels. One of those is in-app chat with us, so feel free to ask us anything there with regards to what we spoke today or anything else. And for law firms interested to learn more from Antony, link to his email is included here. And if you would like to chat with us, just click the link below and we'll be happy to show how LegalTrek can help you in your business. Thank you everybody so much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in one of our next webinars. Bye-bye.